Akosu was a small village that had a mighty river. Its waters were so vast and endless that the villagers believed it was the boundary between the living and the spirit world. The river banks stretched far and wide, whispering secrets in the wind and at night. The moon's reflection danced upon the waves like unseen beings moving beneath the surface. For generations, the people of Akosu lived in harmony with the waters. Their land was barren, unwilling to nurture even the smallest crops, so they relied on the villages beyond the river for food. But the crossing was never taken lightly. It was said that the river was home to powerful mermaids, guardians of the deep, who demanded respect and consultations before any soul dared to cross. And so the villagers obeyed. Before each journey, they would gather at the banks, offering gifts, murmuring prayers, and waiting for a sign from the waters that it was safe to pass. But time has a way of dulling fear. Generations passed, and the people of Akosu grew impatient with rituals they no longer understood. The old ways were slowly abandoned. The villagers stopped asking permission before crossing. They laughed at the tales of spirits lurking beneath the waves, calling them stories of frightened elders. Then, the river reminded them of its wrath. One fateful day, as a group of villagers crossed the waters in their wooden boats, the river turned against them. Without warning, the sky darkened, the wind roared, and the waves rose like great beasts from the depths. Their ships capsized in the middle of the river. Screams echoed, but no one was found. No bodies, no survivors, only the silence of the river, as if it had swallowed them whole. Terror gripped the people of Akosu. No one dared to cross the river again. And soon, the legend took root. A whispered warning passed through lips to ears in the dead of night. Those who vanished in the waters do not die. They become mermaids, forever lost to the river's depths. Since that day, the river of Akosu had remained untouched. The villagers, though starving, refused to set foot near its banks. Instead, they journeyed farther, seeking food in distant lands, their fear overweighing their hunger. The river watched in silence, its surface undisturbed, until the day someone would dare to challenge its course. In the village of Akosu, there lived a man named Kagiso, a man of great wisdom, respected by all. The people looked up to him, seeking his counsel in times of uncertainty. His words carried the weight of knowledge passed down through generations. Kagiso married Zoe, a strikingly beautiful maiden from their village. She was not only admired for her beauty, but also for her kind heart and unwavering support for her husband. She encouraged him in ways he never imagined, becoming his strength in difficult times. However, as the years passed, Zoe was unable to bear a child. This troubled Kagiso deeply, for he longed for children to continue his legacy. The burden weighed heavily on them both, and whispers of concern spread among the villagers. But then, as if the gods had finally smiled upon them, Zoe miraculously conceived and gave birth to a beautiful baby girl. They named her Talia. Kagiso was overjoyed beyond measure. To celebrate, he ventured deep into the forest and hunted the finest bush meat, offering a great feast to mark the birth of his daughter. As Talia grew, she became the pride of the village. She was respectful, intelligent, and deeply loved by all. But when Talia turned 6 years old, Kagiso's heart grew restless again. He had always hoped for a son, yet Zoe was unable to conceive another child. The village elders began murmuring, and his brothers summoned him for meetings, pressing him to take a second wife. They argued that the man of his status needed a male heir. At first, Kagiso resisted, but as the pressure mounted, he eventually gave in and married a second wife, Ione, a woman from another village. Her homeland lay beyond the river, and legend had it that the waters of her village were mysteriously connected to those of Akosu, their depths intertwined in ways few understood. Not long after, Ione became pregnant, and anticipation filled Kagiso's heart. He dreamed of finally having a son, but when the time came, she bore a daughter instead, whom they named Liana. Disappointment settled over Kagiso like a heavy cloud. He hoped for a boy, yet fate had given him another girl. Realizing that he could not fight destiny, he chose to abandon his longing for a male heir and devoted himself to his daughters instead. However, his love leaned heavily towards Talia. He spent more time with her and Zoe, often neglecting Ione and Liana. As the years passed, Ione's heart darkened with jealousy. She longed for Kagiso's attention, not just for herself, but for her daughter as well. Watching him favor Talia and Zoe filled her with resentment. She yearned to have him entirely to herself. Meanwhile, the two daughters grew into strikingly beautiful young women. But while Talia remained humble and well-mannered, Liana became vain and arrogant. She saw herself as superior to the other maidens in the village, often refusing to greet the elders or acknowledge those beneath her. The elders whispered about her behavior, blaming her mother. "She is not truly one of us," they would say. "Her mother is from another land and she has taught her no respect." One fateful day, Talia and Liana were sent on an errand to gather firewood. As they walked through the village, they encountered a group of elderly men who seemed lost. One of them called out, asking for directions to the king's palace. Talia, ever kind and respectful, stopped immediately. She greeted them warmly and offered to guide them. But Liana, carrying her bundle of firewood, did not even glance back. She walked ahead as if she had not heard them, her head held high, her heart filled with pride. The elders watched her with knowing eyes, shaking their heads in disappointment. It was clear to them that while the two young women came from the same household, their hearts were worlds apart. Talia walked the old men through the village until they arrived safely at the palace. Before they parted ways, they made sure to ask of her name and the family she came from. A few weeks later, a group of men arrived in Akosu to meet the king. They came with an important message. Their prince was searching for a bride, and they had found a maiden in Akosu who had left a lasting impression on them. She was none other than the kind-hearted Talia, the young woman who had helped them when they were lost. Upon hearing this, the king ordered his guards to take the men to Talia's home. When they arrived, they formally asked for her hand in marriage. Talia, with the blessings of her parents, gave her consent. Kagiso and Zoe were overjoyed, knowing that their daughter was about to marry into a noble and wealthy family. The bride price was paid, and preparations for her departure began. But little did they know, Ione and her daughter Liana had other plans. The day finally arrived for Talia to journey to her new home. The entire village was filled with excitement as the people gathered to celebrate her. Women danced, children sang, and the elders blessed her with prayers. When they reached the edge of the village, the well-wishers stopped, sending her off with warm words and hopes for a prosperous marriage. Now, only Talia, Liana, and Maya, a young girl chosen to be her maiden in the palace, continued the journey. As they passed through a nearby village, something caught Liana's attention. the river bank. This was the village of her mother, Ione, and its waters were rumored to have an unseen connection to the cursed river of Akosu. Lyanna turned to Talia and smiled. "Sister, you have been walking all day. Would you not want to freshen up before meeting your prince? You must look your best." Talia hesitated. She remembered the legend of Akosu's river, the stories her parents had told her about the spirits that lurked beneath. Sensing her reluctance, Lyanna laughed. "This is not Akosu's river, Talia. You have nothing to fear. The waters here are calm and pure. Just take a quick bath." What Talia didn't know was that Lyanna had inside knowledge. Her mother, Ione, had told her long ago that the rivers of their homeland and Akosu were secretly connected. This was the perfect place for her plan to unfold. Lyanna continued to tease her, urging her to step into the water. She played on Talia's insecurities, reminding her of how important it was to make a good first impression on her prince. After much persistence, Talia finally agreed. Just as Talia began to undress, Maya stepped away to relieve herself in the nearby bushes. As she was returning, she witnessed a horrifying sight. Lyanna, with a wicked grin, shoved Talia into the river. Talia's scream pierced the air, but before she could fight back, something unnatural happened. The waters came alive, swirling around like unseen hands dragging her into the depths. Her body began to transform. Her legs fused together. Shimmering blue scales covered her skin, and within moments, she was no longer human. Talia had become a large blue fish. Maya collapsed to the ground, tears streaming down her face. She had just witnessed something beyond belief. Lyanna turned to her, her eyes cold and sharp. "If you dare tell anyone what you saw, I will cut out your tongue," she hissed. "I am the new queen, and if you wish to leave, you will serve me and earn my favor." Shaking and terrified, Maya nodded in silence. She had no choice. Lyanna quickly changed into Talia's clothes, adjusting herself to look like her. With no evidence left behind, they hurriedly continued their journey. When they arrived in the prince's village, they were welcomed with great honor. Lyanna and Maya were led into one of the grandest rooms, where they were given lavish meals and fine clothing. As per tradition, the bride was to remain hidden for a full month before the moonlight celebration, where she would be revealed to the prince and the entire kingdom. Lyanna smiled to herself. Her mother had told her all about this custom. It was the perfect scheme. No one would see her face until the wedding. She was overjoyed. She had stolen Talia's future, and soon she would become a queen. Meanwhile, Maya remained in silent agony. She could barely eat, knowing the horrible truth. Talia had been loved by all. Her kindness, her wisdom, her respect for others had made her a favorite in Akosu. Now she was gone, and no one would ever know what had happened to her. But fate was not done with Talia yet. And deep in the cursed waters, a blue fish stared beneath the surface, watching, waiting. My dear viewers, what do you think about Maya? She should have just told the villagers, right? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. Now let's continue the story. One day, Maya went to the river bank and sat there, holding an apple in her hands. As she sat, she began to sing a sorrowful song, her voice trembling with pain as tears streamed down her face. As she sang, a large blue fish emerged from the river. It swam towards her, its shimmering scales reflecting the sunlight. Maya was not afraid. She gently offered the apple to the fish, and it ate from her hands. After feeding it, she quietly stood up and returned to the palace. This became a daily routine. Each day, she would bring food to the river and sing, waiting for the fish to come. In the palace, there was a young servant who secretly admired Maya. However, he had never approached her because she was always withdrawn, never speaking to anyone. He had noticed something strange. She barely touched her meals, and she seemed to grow thinner by the day. He also observed that she left the palace often. Concerned, he decided to follow her one evening, curious to see if she was throwing away the food she refused to eat. To his surprise, he saw Maya sitting by the riverbank, singing with the food in her hands. He watched in shock as a massive blue fish rose from the depths and she fed it with care. His heart pounded in fear. The river was connected to Akosu's cursed waters and no one dared to go near it. His thoughts raced. Why was Maya doing this? What was the meaning of the song she sang? Restless and disturbed, he ran back to inform the prince. When the servant told the prince what he had seen, the prince was deeply troubled. He immediately summoned Maya and Liana to the throne room. With a stern voice, he asked Maya, "Is it true? Do you go to the river and sing while feeding the large fish?" Maya trembled in fear. She cast a nervous glance at Liana, who glared at her with warning eyes. The prince's patience was running out. "I order you to speak the truth." With tears in her eyes, Maya finally broke her silence. She told them everything. How Liana had pushed Talia into the river, how she had been transformed into a blue fish, and how she had been feeding her in secret. The entire court fell into a shocked silence. Maya's voice cracked as she revealed Talia's final words. She had forbidden Maya from visiting again, as her transformation was nearly complete. Soon, she would lose all traces of her human soul and become a mermaid forever, lost in the depths of the river. The prince's hands clenched into fists. Betrayal had been sleeping under his roof all along. Without hesitation, he ordered Liana to be thrown into the palace dungeons while he summoned the oldest elder of the kingdom, a man who knew the ancient ways of appeasing Akosu's river. That evening, the entire royal court, led by the prince, gathered at the river bank. The elder brought sacred offerings, preparing a ritual to plead with the waters to release Talia. The atmosphere was heavy, the air thick with anticipation. The elders began chanting sacred words, calling upon the spirits of the river. The villagers watched in silence, their hearts filled with hope. Suddenly, the waters stirred. From the depths, a massive blue fish surfaced. Unlike before, it did not stay in the water. It began to swim towards dry land. The moment the fish's tail touched the dry land, a miraculous transformation began. The shimmering blue scales faded away, the long flowing fins disappeared, and before the eyes of the gathered crowd, Talia emerged, restored to her human form. She stood there, a breathtaking, beautiful woman, her long hair cascading down her back as she took in the sight of the people before her. Maya, overcome with emotion, rushed forward with a cloak, draping it over Talia's shoulder to cover her. Tears welled in her eyes as she whispered, "You are back! You are back, my lady!" Without delay, they returned to the palace. The prince immediately ordered Liana to be brought from the dungeons. When Liana saw Talia standing before her, her face turned pale. She couldn't look at her, her body trembling with shame and fear. Guilt was etched all over her face, and her knees buckled under the weight of her wicked deeds. With a shaky voice, she confessed everything. How she and her mother, Ione, had planned the entire scheme to take Talia's place and deceive the prince. The court erupted in murmurs. The betrayal had been deeper than they imagined. Without hesitation, the prince sent a message to the king of Akosu, informing him of Lyanna's crime. Soon after, Lyanna was sent back to her village, where the entire kingdom learned of her treachery. The people of Akosu were outraged. As punishment, Lyanna and her mother Ione were banished from the land, never to return again. With justice served, peace was restored. Talia returned to the palace, and her parents, Kagiso and Zoe, visited her often. They were filled with pride and joy, grateful that their daughter had escaped her cruel fate. Under the moonlight sky, Talia lived happily, knowing that her kindness had saved her and that no evil could ever triumph over a pure heart. That is the end of the story. I hope you enjoyed it. So please, if you haven't liked this video, what are you waiting for? And if you haven't subscribed, please do so to support my growth. And trust me, you don't want to miss out on any of my stories. Just turn on your bell notification so that whenever I post a new story, you will be the first to know. I'll see you on my next one.